towards the last, I would say, couple of sessions for the for this for this course, and I mean, a lot of what we are discussing is in a lot of ways very superficial. In terms of, there are so many more complexities that, as operation strategists, you will face when you are on the shop floor or on your job. In fact, there could be an entire course around inventory strategy. There could be an entire course around supply chain strategy, and that's how vast these topics are. But in operation strategy, we've more or less kind of touched on some of the most important concepts. And I think, based on your interest, based on the kind of job roles that you guys will be taking on, I think there will be an element of learning from on your jobs also. So I think the the key, I would say, message I'm trying to portray here is the fact that there is so much more that we could have done or we could have touched. There is a textbook that I have shared on the shared Google Drive. There are a bunch of readings that I will be uploading also in the next couple of days. So it's just for someone who's probably a little more interested to understand more about operation strategy, to delve a little more deeper into some of these topics. But if you've been following the classes, I think more or less you would have kind of an understanding of operation strategy, of inventory strategy. We're going to be touching a little bit on supply chain strategy as such, or supply chain from an operation strategy perspective in the next few classes. So I think you would have covered, and of course there is so much more that you guys can I would say, make your hands dirty, if that's the word, because once you start practicing, you'll realize that there are so many concepts which we kind of study in some of our MBA classes, which are very different when you actually go into the corporate life, corporate world. And you will be surprised to see that how many concepts are actually not really adhered to or not really followed. And a lot of these eventually remain as textbook knowledge or the thing. But if you have more or less a basic understanding of, oh yes, this is what we had studied. We'd known of Little's law, and this is what Little's law says, and this is the reorder point, or whatever some of the concepts that we touched on. I think you will be able to pick up things. You'll be able to drive conversations, and a little more, I would say, logical / academic bent of view. Once you are actually presenting your point of view to the management, I think they would really appreciate something very, very simple, and you will be surprised that how many people would be able to appreciate what you are bringing to the table as such. All right. With this, let's have a quick recap on what we did last session. We touched on the concept of economic order quantity, where we realized that typically when we are talking about inventory, there is a trade-off between the fixed cost of ordering and the holding cost of inventory. And it's really this trade-off which different organizations have to kind of make a balance between, and to be able to arrive at the economic order quantity. And when we talk about economic order quantity, it is always how much to order, and when to order is typically your reorder point, which we will be touching on in the first half of this session today. And we will be talking a lot about reorder point. We'll be looking at a formula for reorder point, and we'll see an example which we kind of did for EOQ as well. So let's keep that for later. We also looked at the total cost of inventory management, and when this is when we are talking about EOQ. And we looked at the formula for total cost of inventory management, and this is not something that you need to memorize, but just from a very understanding perspective, remember that the total cost is the number of orders in a particular time frame. It could be a year, it could be a quarter, it could be a week. It depends on whatever time frame you go into, plus the annual holding cost, which is the average level of inventory. Um, all right, this is the formula for ECQ, which we looked at last class. It was 2ds by h, where d is the annual requirement, s is the setup cost, h is the holding cost. Total annual cost using ECQ will be underscore of 2DSH. Okay, these are some things that I wouldn't recommend that you should know by heart. These things, a lot of these formulas will be available for you to refer. In books online, there are a lot of videos on some of these thoughts. So, but you should know when someone talks about how much to order, you should be able to relate to the concept of economic order quantity. You should be able to understand what is the total cost of inventory. You should be able to understand how you calculate ECQ, so on and so forth. All right, let's start with the session for today. And we're talking about when to order, and we're really looking at the reorder point for continuous replenishment. And you will hardly ever come across any organization or any situation where they have hardly, never faced a challenge with their inventory, or never had and had an issue with stock out, or overstocking, and then you have issues around pilferage or spoilage or whatever different issues that might creep in. So here we are talking about a concept where we can minimize these situations to an acceptable level of service quality that we assure our customers. And once again, there is never a situation in an entire organization where there would be they will never run out of inventory. There will more often than not, there will be situations where, despite all these analytical models, and once you actually are on the job floor, a lot of these ECQs and a lot of these other reorder points are automatically calculated by certain softwares and stuff. So you will know exactly when you need to order, and so on and so forth. All right, we're going to be talking about inventory management decisions in terms of when to order. Earlier, we've talked about the idea of how much to order, and we've come up with ECQ as being the optimal order quantity that makes our inventory management costs the lowest. And before we get started, you would want to keep in mind that we are talking about the continuous review system of inventory management. You are continuously reviewing your inventory. You're keeping an eye on how much of inventory you have, and when it reaches a certain level is when you will be placing an order. In order to get started with how you will calculate a reorder point for continuous review in an inventory management system, let's start with a system which has a zero lead time. And when you say a zero lead time, that means that whenever you actually reach a point where your on-hand inventory actually comes to a point where it is zero, the time taken for it to be, for continuous replenishment, or for the stocks to come to the warehouse or come to the store, would actually be zero, or it's really not practical, or it's really unrealistic. But we are saying that there's a zero lead time in this case, and there is an instantaneous replenishment when you go down to zero, and there's a constant demand rate. Again, this is something which you would hardly ever face in a real life scenario. You're utilizing the material at the same rate throughout the lifetime of the particular inventory being in your stock, and you can see very good looking similar triangles across times, which are showing that there is a constant rate of usage of that particular item. When would you place an order here? The answer is obvious. When the inventory goes down to zero, you'll place an order. The reorder point in this case is when inventory becomes zero. However, in reality, what's going to happen is there is going to be a lead time for when you are going to place the order to when you receive it from any supplier. And even if it is a local supplier, even if it is someone who's very close to your factory, there will be some amount of lead time that is there. All right. Now let's incorporate some of the lead time into the same system. And what we are saying here is that depending on the lead time, and this is the lead time here, L, you have a lead time of say 5 days, and you're going to say, have 5 days worth of inventory left with me, and that's when I'm going to actually place an order. This is what's represented in this particular diagram, where the horizontal line above the x-axis, um, which is showing that the reorder point is incorporating that lead time, which is the time it will take for the material to actually get to you or get to the factory or the warehouse, whatever it is. What you have is once it reaches the reorder point in this particular case, remember you are continuously reviewing your inventory, and whenever it reaches this particular reorder point, you will actually place an order for you to be able to accommodate this amount of lead time, and so that you never have a situation where you actually run out of run out of inventory. All right. Once it reaches that reorder point, you will place an order, and then you will have an inventory position that will show up. You can keep track of that, and that will be the inventory position you placed an order. Now, it will take some time for that order to get to you. By the time that order gets to you, your actual inventory position has reached zero. On the day that it has reached zero, you will receive an order that is Q in this particular case. In the continuous review system is ECQ, so you receive an order of Q on the day that your inventory position becomes zero. Again, this is a very ideal situation. In real life, you will not have graphs which is like this. There will be a very different graph. We'll be looking at one of these graphs in just a minute from now. I think a similar question to what we discussed in our previous class also. Um, in terms of determining the reorder point for a continuous review system, you can actually relate this whole concept to what we do on a daily basis on our routine lives, and think about the decision that you'll have to make. Let's say that you are ordering from your groceries from an online store, say Big Basket. In the last time, you remember we had to actually travel to get, or maybe we had to go to the shop to get our groceries. In this case, we are ordering from Big Basket. You have some lead time for when you place the order till the time they actually deliver it to you. Your groceries, when you order your groceries online, say any regular item, say carrot or whatever it is, some vegetables, because that's something that you might receive it from your online supplier. And what would be typically the main consideration for you to decide when is it the right time for you to place your order? What would be the considerations for coming up with this reorder point? Anyone? Okay, when would you say that I should place an order now so that I will receive the groceries in time?
Before finishing all our stock.
Okay, what else?
Suppose we have 20% or 30% stock, and on that time, if we place order, then we will receive that order before completing our inventory.
Before consuming the vegetables, correct?
Yeah.
Correct. Anyone else? How would you decide what are the main considerations? When is it the right time to order for vegetables or order for any household items? All right. Typically, these are some of the things. Although I think this list could have very different pointers depending on your personal preference. So when you place an order from an online grocery store, you're probably thinking about the time that they're going to process the order. Typically, Big Basket will have some kind of delivery lead time. They will say that, your order will be delivered next morning or 3 days or whatever that is. Um, when they are going to, when Big Basket is going to receive the order, they might not process the order immediately. There's going to be some lead time involved. That's going to be the lead time for them to, courier or transport you that particular product to send it to you. And that's also going to factor in the time that it's going to take from when you place the order to when you receive it. And then we call the whole thing as the lead time. Now that what you're concerned about is that your demand for that product during the lead time, or how much vegetables you can consume during the lead time. What we are saying here is that it takes 5 days, for example, for the grocery store to deliver the vegetables to you. You place an order when you have 5 days worth of vegetables or carrots left in your fridge, and you can still consume it over the lead time of 5 days, and it goes down to zero. And by the time you receive the order from the online grocery store to your doorstep, you're actually fine. So, however, you don't know exactly the consumption of the vegetable is going to be in that 5 days. So you may be concerned about some uncertainty of consumption of that vegetable in those 5 days. It's the same thing that most companies are thinking about when they think about something called as the reorder point. In this case, they are thinking about how much of lead time there is and how much of buffer they should have for any miscalculation of their own consumption during that lead time. um, Whether we are going to have more consumption than we expected. If it's lower, it's probably not going to be a problem because there's going to be excess. But if it's higher, the consumption is higher than what we anticipated, then you are going to run short in the lead time. So you basically want coverage for the lead time for that product to get to you. And of course, there will be one-off situations when some the vegetables delivered to you might not be in good shape, or they might not be fit for consumption, and then you might raise an issue, so on and so forth. So these are just at a very conceptual level. These are what organizations are also thinking when they are placing their inventory order, or when they are strategizing about when is it the right or the appropriate time to place an order. Remember, for an organization, it is expensive to hold inventory. For an organization, usually my professors used to tell me that inventory is evil, and that's the word that they used to say. And as much as possible, concepts around just in time and all of these were built around to save those kind of hassles and costs, to avoid any of these things. In the case of a normal household, it might not be so much of an issue. If you have few days extra vegetable here and there, it won't really make a difference. But for an organization where you are stocking up large amounts of inventory of different SKU or different units, there is a cost involved for it, and there is a definite um, factor of the fact that organizations really do not want to hold much more than what they anticipate their demand to be. And in most cases, the demand could be uncertain. And when you figure this uncertainty in demand, you have the same type of picture that you're actually looking at earlier. But it's just that it does not look as neat as it looked before. It does not have straight lines, and we are looking in terms of depletion of inventory. It's not going down in a straight line. We have crooked lines that are telling us that the inventory is being consumed at different rates. You can also see the reorder point. The reorder point is the bumped up from just being what you need for the lead time to be based on an average. You're saying that we expect the certain consumption during the lead time, but you are also bumping up extra in case there is some kind of uncertainty, or what if we run out, let's have some extra. That extra is what you're adding in there, and that's bumping up the reorder point to a higher than what you saw in the last image, which is based on the average demand being there, and no uncertainty in this particular case. All right. So one concept is TBO, time between orders. I think we will touch on it very briefly in the next few slides. But this is how it will look like in really a real world scenario. And more often than not, most organizations, most operation uh, strategy guys have very sophisticated models to kind of calculate reorder points and all kinds of computation in terms of the particular, maybe a holiday season that's coming up. So if there is a anticipated peak in demand, a particular day of the month, day of the week, hour of the day, all of these things are actually factored in to be able to compute these ECQs or reorder points, and you more or less know what is the level of inventory that you are looking at. And of course, in a real life situation, it does go maybe 5-10% up or down, and then you have some kind of a buffer stock, which you guys, which usually the operation guys, account for at that point. All right. Okay. The reorder point is going to be based on two essential things that you're going to figure in. Okay. One is the probability distribution of demand, and this is what I just said in terms of the expected demand, uh, or the probability distribution of demand. What does that mean? It means that you're going to figure in the standard deviation of demand, that is the variance. Don't get too bogged down. If you are expecting certain amount of consumption at a particular point, the variance of the standard deviation will just determine how much it will actually deviate from the expected consumption. You're going to say, I expect my demand during my lead time to be 40 units, but it could be as high as 50 or 60 units. So that's what I want to cover for, because my demand during the lead time could be 40 and 50 or 60 units. So I want to be cover up all the way till 60 units. So that's when we are talking about the variance or the standard deviation here in this case. The other thing, well, that's the first part of it. The other thing that you want to figure in is at what service level you want to provide. I'm sorry, at what service level you would want to give to your customers. What that means in terms of inventory is how much are you okay, with running at any point of time. Are you okay to run out maybe 10% of the time? In which case you are saying that 90% of service level. You don't run out for approximately 90% of the time, but you're okay with running out 10% of the time. And if you want a 95% service level, you're saying that you're okay with running out 5% of the time. And that's really, differs from organization to organization. That's really a managerial decision you have to make. That what is the level of service that you want to maintain, and then you have to incorporate the probability of the distribution of demand and come up with a reorder point based on that probability. So these are the two things that we are going to include in the calculation of reorder point. All right. You have the service level for the customer on the basis of which you have a stock out probability, and you also have a probability distribution of demand. What you see over here um, is a lot when you're using any statistical calculation. This is really your normal distribution. We are going to base our calculation on the reorder point for this normal distribution. And we are going to take all the properties of a normal distribution and use it to come up with the reorder point. If you have a certain stock out probability, you will have the average demand during that lead time, which is going to be the center of this distribution, which is basically saying if you maintain an inventory at this average level, you're okay with running out 50% of the time, because 50% of the data in the distribution is to the left and 50% is to the right. If you're keeping the average demand, you're okay with running out 50% of the time. But if you're not okay with running out 50% of the time, you're adding some safety stock, and that's going to be based on the stock out probability and the standard deviation of demand that you would have got from the data uh, for your demand. And moving on to the formula for the reorder point, let's go through the calculation and then we'll go through an example to just try and see how this formula would actually work. Reorder point is based on the demand during the lead time, which, if we didn't have any safety stock, would simply be let's take whatever lead time we have, let's calculate the demand for that, and let's give the demand during that lead time, and that's the safety stock based on something we call as a Z score or Z score. Now, if you remember from statistics, Z score comes from the standard normal distribution, which we looked at in the previous graph. And it's based on the probability that is to the left and the right of the point. So we'll take the Z score based on that. And in this case of this lesson, what we'll do is we'll just look at a table that's going to give us different Z scores for the different probabilities of running out. We'll look at that in the next slide, but let's just call it z-score, and then we multiply that z-score with the standard deviation of demand during the lead time. We remember we talked about 40 becoming 50 or 60. We might have a standard deviation per period, and we convert it into a standard deviation for demand during the lead time. And what you see on the bottom of the screen is that you are calculating the standard deviation of demand during the lead time by taking the standard deviation per period and multiplying it by the square root of lead time. That is the LT, square root of lead time, and giving you the standard deviation for demand during the lead time. So don't worry about it. We'll go through an example, and let's quickly see how this formula can actually be applied. All right. Now this is a table that's giving you different factors, level of services, and different z values for the different level of services. Don't worry, this will obviously be given to you. And you have a table which says 75% service level translates into 0.67 z value, all the way which goes up to 99.99%, and it translates into a z value for 3.72. What this is saying is that if you want a certain level, you enter the z value corresponding to the z value from this table. And for those of you who are familiar with statistics, this is something that can be calculated very easily from an Excel function based on norms inverse. You put in the probability into the function, and then you get the z value based on that. You can do this easily for any probability that you can actually look at. So these are some things that are mentioned here. It could be some other service level, say it could be 87% or 82%, and you'll be able to get the z value on it. In an Excel sheet, online, or on a log table book, all of that is actually right. Now let's take this idea of a reorder point and let's apply it in an example. What you have here is the average daily demand of 100 units and a standard deviation of 30. So you have a lead time that is given to be as 3 days. The cycle service level that is expected is 92%, or as an organization you would want to maintain a 92% of service level, and you're okay with running out 8% of the time, which is fine because you believe that it hardly happens, or maybe it just happens 8% of the time, which more or less does not align with your business goals. The z value is given to be as 1.41 for that service level, and you're asked to compute the reorder point. Okay, let's use this formula to calculate the reorder point. Remember, average daily demand is 30, average daily demand is 100, standard deviation is 30, lead time for the stocks to come in is 3 days, the cycle service level that you want to maintain is 92%, and you are talking about determining the reorder point. Let's take a couple of minutes. Someone please tell me what the answer. What is the answer that you got? What is the reorder point that you got? Okay, how do we do this? How do we do this example? What is reorder point? Let's try and apply this into the formula. What is D here? That's the average daily demand. What is that? Guys?
100.
What is LT? What's the lead time?
3 days.
Correct. Plus, what is Z? What is Z given here?
1.41.
0.41.
Okay. What is the variation or standard deviation?
30.
Okay. What is the lead time? It's the same.
Yes, sir. 3.
Yes, under root of 3. It is as simple as that. It is as simple as that. So your reorder point here is 373.
And where we to use 92%?
90,
Okay, okay, got
yeah,
it, got it. On
92%.
the basis of 92%, we got 1.5.
We got the Z score here. Everyone clear with this? It's a very simple example.
Yes.
Okay. All right. What does this 373 mean? What is this number telling us here? When we say the reorder point is 373, what
Sir,
what is it?
after 1 year and 8 days, we are going to reorder the stock.
How do you know
Uh,
1 year and 8 days?
Sir, 373, no? So 1 year and
No, 373 is not the number of days. It is the number of units. That's the inventory level at which once your stock reaches is when you will be placing an order. This is the reorder point here. So if you have say 1000 level of inventory and this is where you are going down, so this is the reorder point in this particular case. So you're talking about 373, which will be your reorder point. Everyone with me? Yes, no? Yes, no?
yes, sir.
It is telling us that every time your inventory reaches a level of 373 units, you are using the continuous replenishment system for inventory management. You will place an order which is going to be equal to the economic order quantity that we touched on last week. How much to order? When you reach a level of 373, you will place an order of the EOQ. Here you will have the complete solution. So 373 in this case will be your reorder point. Okay, guys, don't stress out about the formula. Don't stress out about all of these things. Just think of it from a very concept point of view. You have a consumption of 100 units every single day that is being used. There are 30. There could be an uncertainty of demand, or there could be a variation of 30 units. Your lead time to come to your warehouse, that particular product, if it runs out completely, is 3 days. And you are okay with the fact that if 100 customers require that product to be given to you, you are okay with the fact, or management is okay with the fact, that at 92% of the times you are able to cater to the incoming demand. With this scenario in mind, what would be the reorder point at which unit you will be placing an order? And based on the formula, based on these calculations, the reorder point is 373. It is as simple as that. When you are in the job floor, when you are in the shop floor, you will definitely have some kind of a tool, a digital tool to give you 373. It will also have a tool to give you EOQ, and those numbers will vary, depends on the season, depends on the time, depends on it, whatever it is that you are looking at. Everyone with me? Yes, no?
Sir, can you once show me the formula,
Yes,
show us the formula
yes,
of a
yes.
reorder point here?
Yes. Okay. Reorder point here is D. This is the daily demand into lead time. This is the lead time. Basically, it is the time that takes for the stock to be replenished from the supplier or from the vendor, wherever it is. This is the amount of time that will take. Z will be based on the service level that you intend to provide. It could be 100% or 99.99%, whatever that is. In this case, it is 92%. If your organization is okay with 75%, 80%, the Z will have a different value based on this particular table. You will have a variation. Variation is basically your uncertainty in demand, or your standard deviation, you can call it, and into underscore of LT. This is all that you need to know. If you might be asked to calculate what we can call as safety stock, you can use this particular formula. But just remember, reorder point. You don't really have to mug up. Just understand this concept here. What I've spoken about. If you have a daily demand of 100, if you have a standard deviation of 30, lead time of this is a certain service level. What is it when you will be reordering? And when you know that you will be whenever your inventory level touches 373 units, is when you will be reordering. How much you will be reordering will be based on ECQ, which we looked at last class. All right, these numbers will change based on season. If we are holding an inventory base, say maybe you're holding during the regular point, this might hold true. If you are say moving to closer to Diwali or Christmas or New Year, whatever it is, your average daily demand will go up. Maybe it becomes from 100, it becomes 130. You have 30% spike in demand. You can expect a daily, standard deviation of daily demand could be more than 30. There could be certain spikes. The lead time could change based on the supplier's availability of stock, whatever that is, and all of these are rapidly changing. Depends on the season, depends on the time, even it depends on which day of the week it is. And typically in an e-commerce company or any other organization which is looking at ECQ and reorder point, you will need to know some of these concepts at a much more strategic level to be able to talk the language with any operations guy or any other operations strategy guy. That's how simple it is. And please
Sir, I have
don't
a doubt.
complicate it. Yes.
Sir, reorder point is basically that if my stock is like 373, at that point I will order, but how much, that is ECQ, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, right? You understood, right?
Uh-huh.
Yes, that's what it is. And these are just the concepts that you need to know, nothing beyond this. If you know this formula, it's just helps you to be able to calculate. If you don't know, don't worry about it. Actually, when you are on the shop floor, you will have tools to be able to tell you about the reorder points, to be tell you about ECQs, and you will be able to take a much more educated and informed decision. कि यार, this is the situation right now. I think it's better कि इतना डिमांड बढ़ने वाला है, इतना डिविएशन बढ़ेगा हमारा, लीड टाइम माइट इंक्रीज, आवर सप्लायर might run out of stock, and during Christmas or Diwali, we don't want to ensure a stock out, so our service level we want to improve from 92 to 96, 97. So our reorder point should be higher, lower, whatever that is, and that's how you calculate it. That's all that you need to know from an operation strategy perspective. If you want to get much more detail around inventory management and inventory strategy, that becomes a very different discussion. But don't complicate it so much. Just understand what ECQ is. Just understand what the concept of reorder point is, and that should be fine for you. All right. Moving on. Okay. So we've looked at what we call as the continuous replenishment inventory system until now. And that's the system we focused on for ECQ, for reorder points. And that's the system which actually is followed in your real life situations. However, for your knowledge, and maybe there are maybe 5% of companies that actually follow an alternative system that you use, and you might just want to know this. This is probably the last slide in this inventory strategy bit. So it's called the periodic review system. The main difference is that in a periodic review system, the time between replenishments is fixed. So I think you may be familiar with this. Think of a vending machine that you might have in your building, in your school or something, and they might have someone who comes in and replenishes it at fixed intervals. So maybe they come every Thursday at 2 p.m. and then they replenish the stock in that vending machine. So there's somebody who comes there every week or every 4 days or whatever that fixed period is and replenishes the inventory there. What you'll also notice about the replenishment system is that the time period is fixed, but the quantity that needs to be replenished for every product is going to be different every time it gets replenished. For example, you might have 10 slots for chocolates, Cadbury chocolates in a particular vending machine. And on some days that the person comes back to replenish, all of those slots might be empty, in which case the replenishment quantity becomes 10. Some days, 2 or 3 of those might have been used up. So the replenishment quantity actually becomes just 2. And because 8 of them are already there and maybe 2 have been used up. Some days, none of them might be used up and that the quantity required is 0. To contrast with what we have learned in the previous, continuous replenishment system. In continuous replenishment system, you have a fixed order quantity. We came up with an ECQ that was the fixed order quantity. The time between orders is going to be different based on when you reach the reorder point. In periodic review system, the time between the orders is fixed and the quantity is not fixed. It's based on a particular target inventory level. In the case of the vending machine that we discussed, it's the number of slots for the Cadbury chocolates. And if you have 10, that determines how much of quantity would you be replenishing at any point of time, at any point in time. So these are the two main kinds of inventory replenishment systems that are commonly used in pretty much every organization. There is a place where when you look at a larger ERP system that will be making decisions for inventory, but these are the basic ideas that are in place even in that ERP system. Even if you use any other software or digital tool, that those these concepts of ECQ, the basic formula of ECQ that we learned in the continuous replenishment system or the reorder point, it can be looked at from a more sophisticated perspective if you were to relax some of the assumptions. And if you remember, we started off saying that there are no discounts for any terms and price. The annual demand is constant. There are so many assumptions that we actually looked at. When we take all of those restrictions and relax them, it's going to get a little more complicated, and the model becomes a lot more complex, and the calculations, of course, become a lot more complicated. But if you understand the concept, I think that's what we are really looking at. Everyone okay with the periodic review system? Can someone tell me what a periodic review system is, and how is it different from continuous replenishment? Guys, I just spoke. Someone. Okay.
So we check the inventory levels at specified intervals of time.
Correct. And maybe it could be whatever the number is, and the demand for that for your inventory might not be constant. Sometimes all of the 10 chocolates are eaten up. So basically, the guy who comes to fill in those replenishment units will have to place in all 10. Sometimes maybe 8 of them are eaten up and 2 are empty. So he'll just put in 2 of them. That's what periodic review system is. And continuous replenishment system is where you have ECQ and you have reorder point, and your ECQ basically tells you how much to order, and your reorder point tells you when to order. All right. Okay. Moving on, we look at a little bit on supply chain from a strategy perspective, from an operation strategy perspective. We'll not be getting into details of supply chain management and all of that, but I think for the next 15-20 minutes, let's just do a quick catch up. I'm sure that you guys in some course or the other must have gone through supply chain management. So this is for the next 15 minutes, it'll just be a little bit of recap so that we can actually delve into some of the operation strategy concepts, supply chain from an operation strategy concept in the next class. Okay, what is a supply chain? Can someone tell me what is the basic understanding? What is their understanding of supply chain? Guys, we moved on from inventory. We are talking about supply chain. It's a different topic now.
So supply chain, we can say, is that a transformation of raw materials into finished goods.
Okay. Yeah. So you guys have had a chance to go over some of these classes. Have you had a chance of learning supply chain somewhere?
Yes, sir. We had a separate subject for this.
And you've gone through it, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when was this? Second semester or this semester?
Second semester, sir.
Okay, perfect. So I guess you guys know a lot about supply chain. What we will quickly touch on is okay. Let's go through it. Like someone in the class mentioned, if you were to think of a chain, it's the different links in that. It starts from the very basic raw material and goes all the way to having the product in the hand of the customer, even talking about the disposal of the product after the customer has used it. We can talk about the complete supply chain, going from purchase of raw material to the distribution of product to recycling and eventually to the disposal also. Okay, let's look at supply chain complexity related to demand. We have the definition of supply chain that we've seen what it means. Let's see why this topic has become important in the last few years. There are two aspects to this, why complexity has increased. One is because the demand has significantly improved in the last 4 or 5 decades. So, guys, what we will do is we will maybe just take another session on supply chain, and then we'll kind of go over some of the other topics. Since you guys have done supply chain, I think it might not make so much of sense to be able to do this. What we'll do is we'll touch on it for maybe one session, or we'll keep it towards the last session. It'll be more of a recap for you guys, but we'll look at some of the matrices, how your operation strategy might be able to fit in with some of the matrices at a corporate and a strategy level. So this is the same when we touched on right in our initial classes in terms of the operation strategy aligning with the business strategy, aligning with the corporate strategy. You remember, right? We had a discussion around this. So we look at some of the matrices instead of delving deep into the supply chain aspect, since you've actually gone over these concepts. But we will touch upon a little bit maybe for one class, and I think that should be enough for it, because there isn't too much. If you've actually taken an entire subject of supply chain, there might not be too much that might be very different from you from what some of the other that material would have said. All right. In this particular case, customers today, if you're thinking of buying things for yourself, you have a lot of choices to buy any product, and you can buy it all over the world pretty much, and you don't have to worry from which country it is coming for or which country you're living in. Companies are able to sell across borders, and most countries have relaxed restrictions on materials being passed from one place to another. So the market is going to be very global as such. Yeah, and you don't really even have to go to an store to be able to experience something, and you can rely on other people's experiences on e-commerce stores, or most e-commerce stores have started coming up with very interesting tools where you can actually try on certain stuff. It could be spectacles, it could be clothes, and it'll be able to align it appropriately to your thing. So the life cycle of products has become a lot shorter. What's happening is that with increasing change in technology, there is a lot of innovation that's happening, and products are getting renovated, and you're getting new products every quarter, every year. You're getting new types of cell phones, new tablets and computers, and all of it is changing very quickly. And the internet has made a much bigger impact. Nowadays, the use of data to be able to forecast, and what you see this is making and managing the demand much more complex for any supply chain for that particular purpose. All right, let's look at it from a supply side perspective. So if you're an organization, or if you're a retailer that's actually supplying, the amount of data or analytics and the information systems is going to have an impact on the supply side as well. There are opportunities that companies have in terms of sourcing from suppliers, and there has been an increase in outsourcing simply because companies have to keep better tabs on their suppliers. And I think some of these concepts we touched on when we spoke about Dell, when we spoke about the case of Amazon, when we spoke about Walmart, in terms of how some of these companies had differentiated their operation strategy to be able to cater to their customers and cater to their demand better. The only really change that's happening from a strategic perspective is that operations is slowly becoming more of a tech function, and even operation strategy is becoming more of a tech function rather than it being how traditionally retailers or e-commerce companies or anyone used to manage their operations, there is an entire element of uh, analytics and the entire move towards sustainability. Uh, all of these things are ensuring that uh, organizations have much more control over a lot of factors, including the orders, including the demand for some of these orders, including some of the changing consumer preferences, and all of which can actually be built at some level into each of these models which these companies use. So I think that's one aspect that has changed from a supply chain perspective, and that's also changed from an inventory management perspective. And I think this trend is going to be there for years to come. Supply chains are going to, in my opinion, at some level, be very, very restrictive in terms of newer technologies that are coming in. You have 3D printing that's coming in, and people are actually building software based products, and you can actually you can actually transfer those files to say a friend who's say in Dubai or in Singapore, and he can actually download that file and be able to print it real time in using a 3D printer. And we are not looking at it from too much of a time frame, and this is going to become a reality probably in the next 7 to 10 days, 7 to 10 years. I'm so sorry. And and uh, and all of these, I would say, technology trends will have an impact on the organization's uh, operation strategy. And I guess let's keep the supply chain element to the last class. We'll look at some of the matrices in the next 2 sessions, 2 or 3 sessions, before we can actually close up on supply chain. And let's really close the course there. Beyond which, if you guys have any other questions, or there are some other topics which I will be sharing additional readings on, please feel free to go over them. Uh, if you have any questions, we can have a follow-up session, even if it is for a couple of students. That should also be fine. And we will have to undertake an exam. So guys, you guys could already start going over some of the presentations, go over some of the reading materials, some of the textbook I shared, at least some of the topics that we've covered in class. I think if you'll be able to spend some time and go over it from a